But also he's universally recognised as one of the most complex and beautiful and absolute creative geniuses in the world of classical music. And so I think in terms of the understanding Germany and understanding Germanness, that mixture of really genius level composing, grand vision. He basically redesigned the whole idea of opera. He refused to call his operas, he called them music dramas. Okay. He, rather than talking about histories or real life events, he went back into German mythology and all this kind of stuff. He wrote this enormous epic called The Ring Cycle, which is actually 4 really long music dramas, each one between 2.5 or 4 hours each. Wow. And there's 4 of them in a row. And it's picking up on all of these ancient German and Nordic traditions about this ring of magical power. And it's the same kind of things that Tolkien then uses to write The Lord of the Rings. So same kind of, there's a magic ring and it rules, you can rule the world if you have it, and it makes you disappear, and all these kinds of things is all built into this. And so he's an absolute musical genius. And yet at the same time, obviously really problematic in terms of raging antisemite, and
he wrote virulently anti-Semitic essays.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like it's not it's by no means a secret, or he wasn't even trying to hide how much he hated Jews, and so again, a lot of that ideology comes out in his writing and even in some of his music dramas, which gets used for the purposes of Hitler and the Nazi regime. And so one of the big questions, I think the big meta questions around Germany is, how do you have a country of such high culture also create the greatest atrocity in the 20th century through the Holocaust? And the question is then, how do those fit together? And so I guess as part of, as I think about what does it mean to be German, what does it mean to have this as part of my heritage, how do you make sense of these competing forces, that there's high creativity, high drama, high culture, and at the same time you've got this raging ideology in the background to moderate ground and then obviously foregrounded. And what does it mean to have both of those in the heritage of my people, of my nationality, I suppose, in that sense. And so, so it's been fascinating so it was a great course that I got through the Sutherland Library app. Shout out to Hoopla. Thank you for being able to borrow it for free.
Thank you.
So 40 something hours of content.
Wow.
But it was great. It was, in terms of understanding Wagner, his times, his ideology, his history, and his music dramas. So.
It's fascinating that, not fascinating. I always have wondered, like, I think I put it on the Chip Lunch podcast. There's a podcast I listened to called Martyr Made, which was talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict and where it started. And it talks about how this line of anti-Semitism ran through a lot of Europe, and a lot of the reason that Israel as a state or a nation was created, or they attempted to create it, was because of the persecution that Jews were experiencing. But in particular, Eastern Europe and Russia, where they would just literally hunt Jews. And then it just sounds like it's obviously in other areas too. I find it just so, not to be too much into it, I find it just very sobering to know that was the case.
Yeah.
And then so he writes, someone who's a musical genius, like you're saying, Wagner was, but he's writing stuff like that. Isn't it funny, like with our heroes, a lot of geniuses, that they're always very flawed?
Absolutely, yeah. Which we shouldn't, we should expect as Christians, because we know that we have both the sinful nature and the created nature in us at the same time. So we should expect of each person to have contributive, beautiful elements to their person, because everyone is created in the image of God, everyone has been created with purpose and meaning to create and create culture, to contribute. Everyone has creativity. We've talked about that before, how that doesn't mean creative arts. It means that everyone has a way in which they can contribute to the flourishing of society. That's part of our createdness, and everyone is also fallen. And so we should expect that everyone we meet, every hero, every part of history has both of those elements in it, which I think makes us wise to avoiding what I've heard a couple of people talk about as, black hat, white hat take on political issues, particularly, or historical issues, as in like there's always good guys and bad guys.
Yep.
And I want to go all in with the good guys, or I want to claim the good guys for myself. We talked about Bonhoeffer, I think, a few weeks back, and that idea that people want to claim Bonhoeffer for themselves. We see him as the good guy. But everyone is complex. Everyone is complicated. I remember talking to a guy at church who was wrestling with, well, what do we do with Luther? Because he had all these, Protestant Reformation, all these wonderful things, but also towards the end of his life also wrote some really horrible anti-Semitic things. And I'm having these conversations. This guy was having a bit of a crisis of what do I do with the writings of Luther. And I just smiled and said, oh man, I'm German. I just, you just kind of live with it, right? Because this is it. Like my heritage is one that is caught up with Luther and Nazism and Beethoven and
Wagner.
Mozart and Wagner. And so all of these things. And so to be able to be at a place where you look at your own, sort of concentric circles, you can start with yourself. You should expect to see good, createdness and contributive purpose and fallenness in yourself, in your friends, in your colleagues. And then, you keep expanding out into your culture, your country, your political ideas. And it matters in the way that we then read about, conflicts like the Israeli-Palestine. And a lot of the commentary is highly partisan one way or the other.
Yeah.
As well, no, Israel can do no wrong. We must support everything that they do because they're the white hats. Or you're on the other side and say, no, everything they do is atrocious. We must do everything we can to support the Palestinians. And it's the ability to be able to say, well, actually, maybe they're complex. Maybe their leaders are complex. Maybe the actions that they take are complex. In a complex world, that doesn't get as much clicks and doesn't get as much traction in the media. But it shouldn't surprise us that even the side that we would most align with can also do horrible things. Right. And the side that we don't align with can also do things that are right. And being able to hold both of those things together is really key, I think, in able to understand world politics and current politics and those kinds of things.
And possibly, I wonder, maybe only possible when you live in the light of the gospel as well. Like not fully, I'm not saying you can only do that only if you're a Christian, but I think because you know that Jesus is this leveler for everyone, that it changes the kind of level that you're interpreting those events or those ideas through the lens of the gospel.
It's your big meta picture of what is humanity.
Yeah, that's what I think, yeah.
Certainly, Judeo-Christian, I suppose, if you're talking about Genesis, because, the Jews would have a very similar anthropology at that level. And then, of course, where Christianity diverges is that the ultimate humanity is seen in the person of Jesus. And so that gives us both the idea of redemption, that redemption is possible, and also that we're looking forward to consummation. We're looking forward to new creation and when everything will be made new. And so that idea of creation, fall, redemption, consummation is a fairly typical way of explaining, I guess, the grand vision, the grand story of the Bible. And yes, being able to apply that then to the way you read news, the way you consume content, the way you think about yourself, your friends, your colleagues, is really important.
And I think there's also this element, I think you're right about that, and I think there's this element of, you've talked a number of times about having a non-anxious presence about it too. And it is obviously built on the foundation that God is in charge of everything, and we know that he holds the world in his hands, and he is still working and doing it through people that may not even, like he's still working through people in their weakness. I remember Braden was preaching about that last weekend for us. And I was also thinking as you're speaking there about power as well, and Stu mentioned power, I think it was even last week, of that. How do we, if we were online, for example, what are we using? We do have a certain amount of power if we have an audience of any kind. Thank you to everyone that listens and watches the Shock Absorber. But there is a power to have influence over people there. And you were talking about there needs to be an accountability of knowing that what you're teaching and talking about is important and can influence people as well. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, sometimes you get weighed down by the corruption of sin. But then there's also these moments, I think even what we're talking about there, that Wagner can still produce something extremely beautiful and compelling. Yeah. But he's extremely flawed and corrupted as well.
And that's okay. We don't need to we can say how beautiful is this piece of music, this music drama, without therefore saying that his ideology was okay. And likewise, we can condemn his ideology without cancel culturing his music drama. So that's key as well. I think you'd be able to hold those two things in tension.
Yep.
Which brings you the whole thing of, is someone's conduct ever sufficient to stop listening to their music or whatever? I mean, that's a whole different conversation, I suppose. But it's kind of connected in that, could someone's conduct disqualify them from their art, I suppose?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there are some times that I hold somebody like that, whatever it is, and it depends on whether I appreciate their art or what they produce. Is how long,
which is an emotive reaction,
rather
than a necessarily thought out one.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing we have to be careful of.
Yeah.
How do you, again, look at everything through a biblical lens